Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first session of Impetus of the Soul, Hume's Philosophy of Force and Vivacity, by Professor Reza Negarestani. David Hume is not merely a footnote to Kant's awakening for his dogmatic slumber, or for that matter, political philosophy in its incandescent glory. He is first and foremost the trademark name for that unbridled worry and anxiety that philosophy subtly administers to the deepest recesses of any soul accustomed to its ways, and equally to those who reject them. Laid bare in plain English, and freed from all floral vapidities which often accompany intellectual hubris, Hume's work are too crispy and pointed to be mistaken for anything other than what they really are. Diamond wedges shot from the canon aimed at the fortified walls of various notions and manifestations of intellectual laxity, theoretical self-aggrandizement in the name of critique, and most importantly, the unexamined tenets of all learning in general. This two-credit seminar engaged with the Sphinx of modern philosophy, David Hume. The focus will be Hume's philosophy of force and vivacity as a processual doctrine of passions and ideas, most notably examined under the rubric of imagination in its relation to time. In line with your previous seminar, The Vicious Transparency of Time, an inquiry into the nature of inner time consciousness via Husserl, the seminar reanimates Hume as a cipher for philosophical revenge upon some of the most cherished orthodoxies of transcendental philosophy. Hume will be introduced as a philosopher whose method foils any premature attempt at a resolution made under the aegis of empiricism or under the banner of rationalism. Reza Negarestani is a philosopher. He has contributed extensively to journals and anthologies and lectured at numerous international universities and institutes. His current philosophical project is focused on rationalism, universalism, beginning with the evolution of modern systems of knowledge and advancing towards contemporary philosophies of rationalism, the procedures, as well as the demands for special forms of human conduct. He is the author of Cyclonopedia, published by Repress in 2008. Reza, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Glad to see some old faces and new ones, as always. So before I start, and this session, every time we have this, the first session is usually quite a lot of it would be, just introduction and kind of moving around with some of the ideas that are going to shape the entire seminar. But also I'm going to read a few things, provide kind of like a general scope of this seminar, how it's going to unfold, what are exactly the problems. Some of them are murky, I mean, majority of them are very murky at this point. But nevertheless, underlining these, and then next session we pick up the pace with the continuation of Hume's methods, the set of problems, and then the third session we enter the war zone. And of course, my sincere apologies for postponing, delaying this class. I mean, it has been quite infernally hectic here. But regardless, hopefully, I'm pretty sure that there won't be any sort of cancellation of the class or anything. So to start, it would be great if you can one by one, following the rows on the Zoom, introduce yourself and say something about where you are coming from and why you have taken this course. I mean, you should understand that at least compared to so many other things that are happening in philosophy today, talking about Hume is probably not that interesting to so many people. So that would be great to understand, why you are taking this class. Okay. Who is going to start first? I mean, you can start after me, after the row, or our moderator first, and then Lucia.
I can start.
Sure, absolutely.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lucia. I'm from Argentina. I'm currently living in Mexico City. My background is in architecture, and studying philosophy has been something new for me from a couple of months now. So the reason I decided to be in this seminar is because I wanted to learn something new and get to know Hume. I have read some things, but I'm not that. I don't have that much knowing about him.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's great. Thank you so much. Well, I mean, people who have taken my classes before, they know that, yes, we do some introductory stuff, but it's ultimately at the end of the day, it would be ever more confusing, the process of problems.
I'm prepared for that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cassia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Cassia. I'm from Brazil. My background is mainly in philosophy. My trajectory started studying Wittgensteinian aesthetics. Then in my master, I worked upon some themes on intelligence and spirit. And currently I'm working on an investigation of radical feminism using the new rationalist conceptual frameworks along the line of xenofeminism. So that's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
This class,
yes.
I'm interested to keep up with your kind of like Husserlian turn, which I didn't accompany very much. So, and also the appendix of Intelligence and Spirit was the least explored part of like my studies. So, and I think that Hume is like foundational for the riddle of induction problem and so on and so forth. So
I see. Thank you so much, Cassia, and great to have you back.
Thank you.
Maxime?
Hello, I'm Max, or Maxim. I'm in Los Angeles. I've been wanting to do some new Thunder course for a while, actually, but I think Hume is a great start. He's kind of at the root of both philosophy and psychology. I'm not in academia. I have background in IT and I work in IT, but I've been interested in philosophy for a while, so I'm excited to see what's going to happen.
Excellent. I mean, if you are IT, I mean, I'm not making a leapfrog of associations here, but I mean, are you also interested in something like, you know, pattern recognition, AI models today?
The AI is kind of too much of a buzz around it now, so
just pattern recognition, pattern wars.
To be honest, for me, it's like instead of being, it's like to get out of this cycle. I have squirrels right on my balcony. This is fun, but it's for me, it's kind of to get out of the cycle of news and to get to the stuff that's at the bottom of any fundamental understanding, because there's so much stupid kind of stuff about AI now.
Discourse, yes. The reason I said this is precisely because, you know, last session, it would be 8th session, we will actually talk about, you know, this whole idea that the understanding of Hume, particularly the understanding of force and vivacity and associations, is absolutely the fundamental, what you might call to be contribution ever done to what you might call to be contemporary AI.
Great, but I have more existential angst about AI
Existential
than understanding of it.
Yes. Okay. Freya.
Hi everyone, I'm Freya. I hope my internet connection is all right. I'm from Germany and I recently finished my master's degree in philosophy, and I mostly am interested in Simondon as a philosopher of technology, and also as an environmental philosopher. And currently I'm focusing on Simondon's relationship with Nietzsche, and also Stiegler's relationship with Nietzsche, especially concerning the notion of tragedy. And yeah, I really enjoyed the last seminar on time. This is why I'm also taking this seminar, and I'm also really interested in Hume as a critic of Descartes, and I'm looking forward to learn more about it.
It's always good to have you here. And I think last time I asked you, have you got Francisca's class?
Yeah.
Because she's a Simondonian person.
Yeah, it was really good. I had a really good conversation with her with my final project and everything. It was
You should
really
meet her if you are kind of, I mean, she's also in Frankfurt, if I'm, she's a magnificent person. But yes, so why Hume? Hume, precisely because you are going to the idea of technicity, the technique, the essence of technique, but why Hume then?
Oh, well, I don't know much about Hume, unfortunately, so far. But yeah, for a start, I'm just really interested in the connection to, or like the problem of mechanism that is connected to technology, and also to the concept of organology. And I always come across this this major criticism on Descartes, but I don't really know how to engage with it properly, and in terms of or outside of this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I mean, you see, the problem with Descartes is quite very severe, precisely because continental French philosophy, also German philosophers, only triangulate, focus on a very particular period of Descartes, right? Descartes, I would say that even more giant than Hume, the totality of his work, precisely because he starts from a very dogmatic rationalism, he then goes to a soft rationalism, then from soft rationalism to a very sophisticated rationalism, particularly in method. Then during the Leiden period, he becomes a naturalistic rationalist philosopher, very much like Hume. And that always in philosophy, when we want to scare children, students, we always use the boogeyman Descartes. but it is completely incorrect. And yes, I would say that. So what you are interested in essentially is the hubris legacy, hubris Cartesian legacy of mechanisms, which are definitely in Hume. And one of the books that I shared for the reading materials that we were supposed to read, the Pyrrhonic chapter, there is actually a chapter about the hubris legacy, the hubris origin of Hume, particularly with regard to the mechanistic philosophy. But the best book that I suggest on this, if you can find it somehow used, it's out of print, it's called The Light and Enlightenment. Written around 1960s, early 1960s. It's a magnificent survey of these sorts of ideas that unfold with Descartes, go through the Hobbist revolution, Spinozian conflagration, and then ultimately, Hume and philosophy of technique. Thank you so much, Priya. So, next.
Next should be Kamo.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. It's actually my second lecture at the New Center. I come from a physics background, and but now I do the critical philosophy certificate program. I'm in the program now. So why Hume? Actually, Hume, I think I have overlooked Hume for a long period of time. I think I want to get I want to get different perspectives on him, and I usually study, or I usually read the German idealism or more contemporary philosophers like Deleuze and Zizek. But I think I want to get a like a wider perspective and get a better grasp of Hume's importance into the continental philosophy.
Yes. Okay. Magnificent. What field of physics?
I do like quantum chromodynamics. Like I try to understand basically how quarks and gluons interact and how the energy, momentum, and pressure inside the proton is distributed inside the proton, and try to get a better understanding like how quarks and gluons really interact and form the proton's mass. And so more on the high energy physics side. And
okay, excellent. Then we will be very careful not to, making bad physicist metaphors during the course.
I'm happy that you do. I mean, like you criticize. I think there are a lot to be criticized.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rohan.
Yeah, hi. I'm just finishing my BSc at Goldsmiths right now. I'm studying computational art. I'm doing so it's like a computer science mixed like with digital art in a sense. And I haven't really studied Hume or anything in depth, but I've sort of been self-studying, like sort of like Kant, Hegel, and like Spinoza, and so I've been sort of going through the history of philosophy, and I just sort of wanted to have more of like a formal structure in a sense of being able to.
Well, I mean, as I mentioned to Max, literally Hume, if you are into that sort of digital computer science, AI, pattern recognition, I mean, Mid-Journey, Dali's implications for art and stuff, this is it. Hume is absolutely the grandfather of that sort of discourse. But he's not essentially, you should understand that contemporary AI works by way of what we call black box empiricism. And it is kind of like a, very vulgar Berkeleyan empiricism, where we say that, well, there is nothing to thinking, there is nothing to reason, there is nothing to anything really, other than, for example, these sorts of empirical associations being obtained among, a large set of data. Well, there might be a grain of truth to this sort of stuff, but Hume is one of the first people in that line of tradition of empiricism who begins to sabotage from within the empirical associationist philosophy handed to him by the likes of Berkeley and Locke. And it is magnificent to situate, for example, in AI discourse. And there are some people that I have seen very briefly have done that in some short essays, that to use Hume as a kind of a spear against the onslaught of black box empiricism that you get in the, big data, I don't know, LLMs, artificial neural networks, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, a few years ago, like I was into the like CCRU sort of like network of like texts and things, and then
you are coming from Goldsmith.
Yeah.
That's where CCRU's influence is quite palpable.
And like I tried to work through some of like intelligence and spirit and stuff, but then I realized like I had to have more of a background in, Kant and like the whole.
I see. Hopefully, this seminar will confuse you a little bit, give you a little bit. Shouldn't expect too much though. Yeah. Thank you so much, Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl, and I like good horror stories, and I think the line from Hobbes really to Hume and the sort of Enlightenment, empiricism and naturalism.
The path of the wolf.
Yeah, it's something that I've become increasingly interested in the past couple of years, and it's as kind of one of the grandest kind of horror stories of the mind that has been told. So I haven't had too much time to sort of dig into this, but I saw you were giving this seminar, so I thought I'd take the chance to sort of see what all of you guys might be saying.
Of course, I'm not going to talk about Hobbes that much. Yeah, probably so. That there is this book that is coming from Urbanomic. It's called The Machine Decision is Final, AI and China, right?
Yeah.
I hope, we are recorded. We cannot talk stuff about other sort of stuff. But nevertheless, when I read this book, that's who I am. I am quite candid about my sentiments. When I read the volume, it's not published yet. I thought, my God, this is just PRC propaganda 101. Chinese People of Republic propaganda. There is literally nothing in there other than propaganda about, we have this sort of new AI and so on and so forth. It's just like Western AI garbed in Chinese propaganda. But there is one essay that caught my eye, and you guys know him. He has shady politics, but quite a smart, bright person, Vincent Garten. And his essay is essentially about Hobbes. It's a very good essay. It's a magnificent essay. And then I said, okay, I'm going to respond to his essay in that same book, particularly about the legacy of that horror story that you mentioned, from Hobbes, not even to Hume, but, after that to AI and so on and so forth. It is actually quite a horror story. And precisely, it is the sort of horror stories that is in vogue in California.
Yeah. I mean, the potential that this is, at the end of the day, this is what we are. Just the sense that we're getting that, maybe this is it, is even not just in the AI, but also as a theory about any kind of...
About politics. That's essentially Vince Garten thing. So, Hobbes is essentially the canonical philosopher who is majority of people thinks or address him, even Floridi and all, like people who are completely apolitical in theoretical computer science and AI discourse, credit him as being the grandfather of AI, except that he cannot be grandfather of AI. He's the grandfather of the politics that makes today's discourse about AI thus and so. Precisely because Hobbes' discourse about, ratiocinators, right? Universal ratiocinators, mechanisms essentially, as Garton has shown, is completely, undistinguishable from his discourse about Leviathan, about the constitution of modern state.
I look forward to reading that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Is it Denise? I think you took my class at some point.
Yes, I did. But I didn't manage to finish I took the Freud class last year.
Yes.
Yes, and I really enjoyed it and was very insightful, but it was like a crazy time in my life last year and I didn't manage to submit the final paper. But yeah, so this is why I wanted to take again this class, and I want to submit the final paper. So I'm, as you might remember, I'm from Mexico, and but I used to live in the Netherlands the past like 7 years, and since then I started like developing or imagining this project that because I used to work in like a warehouse, in an industrial warehouse in the port of Rotterdam, and that was like through that job that was like the first time that I guess I got more interested in like thinking technology or like like cybernetic or even like this cognitive science because of how technology is applied there in these like super sophisticated, like almost like surveillance systems or like that are applied to the workers and to the work and like all these circuits.
Right.
So I've been yeah, like last year Freud seminar was really interesting to like, I don't know, like I just had fun like speculating like through maybe theories, because I don't have a background in philosophy, like through theories that are more like speculative to how to think about this kind of labor, about this kind of space, or like speculate about, gender and technology and this kind of stuff. So I don't know much about Hume, but I think I'm looking forward to speculate stuff.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Is it Pradeep or Pradeep?
Yeah, am I audible? Hello.
Yes.
Yes, it's Pradeep.
Pradeep.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm from India, and I have a background in design. I currently work as a educator, a design faculty, and a graphic designer as well. Communications designer mostly, but a lot of graphic work happening. Simultaneously with my bachelor's degree, I later on, while exploring communication theories, I have also sort of developed an interest into philosophy as well. Through going through, my route was mostly people like Marshall McLuhan and some Eastern philosophy that I was previously interested in as well, including Chinese philosophy also. And McLuhan
What
became
sort
my
of Chinese philosophy?
Mostly Taoism.
Okay.
And somewhat
Taoism, like the old way, the medieval way, or the new Confucianism?
Not the new Confucianism, the old way. Mostly I was sort of looking at that parallels with Kashmiri Shaivism and Advaita also to some extent. But I recently sort of discovered while reading Telugu a sort of new way of differentiating Advaita and Kashmiri Shaivism, which became a very interesting sort of movement for me. And then recently I sort of also gained an interest in Tantra in terms of an Eastern sort of a derivation of Shaivism. But that being said, so I have like, I still can't pinpoint to exactly a particular, so a sole interest of mine, but I guess I'm still exploring a lot of stuff that interests me, and I'm quite comfortable with that as such. But then one of the reasons why I'm taking the Hume course is because I realized something about it. I know nothing about Hume per se, except that Deleuze wrote a book on him. But then I haven't even read that part of Hume. But what interested me was title of the course in some sense, where you're talking about a philosophy of force. I think that part sort of interested me because I also look at Nietzsche as a philosophy of affect, and there is some sort of relationship that I see connotating between affect and force and intensity. Intensity as something that you talks about.
I see.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these philosophers like Descartes, Hume, Nietzsche, Husserl, despite all the contradictions among or conflicts among their philosophical systems, what they have in common is an attempt at reinvent philosophy as a science of all sciences.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are going to look at Hume's, yes. So why is that Hume feels the urge to reinvent philosophy, right, as a science? Obviously, this is one of the first systematic attempts ever done to reinvent philosophy in such vein. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
James?
Yeah, hey everyone. And also, if I get interrupted during the introduction, sorry, I'll just mute myself and come right back, but I might get interrupted. Yeah, really interested to be in this class with all of you, all the backgrounds, very diverse interests, really interested to see how this discussion goes as the course moves on. I guess my background, it's very winding, like everyone's here, but I guess undergraduate, I was doing computational neuroscience, and then went into software engineering because of the pandemic, and now I'm doing MA in media studies. And I guess that's kind of how I came to this interest in philosophy, through kind of getting this humanities background, but I guess the sort of media philosophy that I've been introduced to through that has been like German idealism, I guess. My professor has like interest in phenomenology and like Husserl and like Merleau-Ponty and that kind of stuff. So that was like
the background. Where are you studying?
Boulder, University of Colorado.
Oh my God, University of Boulder. We have probably some mutual friends there.
Really? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
What the world is so small.
in the what department? Maybe. Yeah, we could talk
media
later,
studies department.
Really?
Yes.
Who? Can I ask?
I mean, I'm not going to talk about
we'll talk.
it.
Yeah,
right
sure.
now.
Fair enough. That's wow, what a coincidence. That's incredible.
Yes.
Anyway. So yeah, I guess I come to Hume through that interest in media philosophy and techniques generally, and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
It's magnificent. Yes, excellent. Okay, Paula.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paula, and I'm from Spain. Right now, I'm writing my PhD. So I'm researching about Kant, so probably Hume is one of the best options to
yes.
And also because I'm quite interested in the notion of a space in Kant and in Hume, because I use it in a practical way. I use it for the doctrine of right. And then I'm quite interested in the notion of a space, for example, in all the philosophers that precede Kant. But also I'm interested in the principle of ideas association in Hume, because it opens a wide world of imagination and combination of ideas, and that's where maybe that kind of reflection that is already in the experience, maybe lays or whatever. So yeah, I'm quite excited about this course actually.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think that it's Kant who has a little bit more, obviously because of the transcendental schema, has more emphasis on space, right? Hume idea of a space is fundamentally coming from Boyle and Newton. And in fact, majority of his methodology in terms of explanatory vector comes from these two people. And it's not really that interesting, the stuff that he talks about the space. But what is actually really interesting is when he talks about time.
Yes.
I don't think that any philosopher, Kant's idea of time is not that interesting, really. It's a transcendental ideology after all. But when Hume talks about time, my God, it is the most interesting idea. And it is time that actually, in Humean sort of way, coagulate the idea of a space.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I'm not that interested in the notion of a space, but the occupying the space is what's actually
Yes. Okay. So it's kind of a critical take on a space, through the vein of critical philosophy, continental philosophy, so on and so forth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Who's the next?
The next should be Raviv.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, I'm Raviv. I'm from New York City. That's where I currently live also. I have a background in like pure math, basically, but I've been studying at the New Center for about a year now. I guess I'm interested in Hume because when I was teaching myself philosophy a little bit before I got here, and I picked up Hume, I inquiry concerning human understanding, and I didn't think I would really like Hume at all because I thought he'd be like really dry and stuff, and it ended up being like just one of my favorite philosophy texts. I think I forget what chapter it is. Like chapter 4 of Hume's Inquiry is just like I think one of the best like philosophical essays like ever. Like he just lays everything out so clearly. It's just like one of the best articulated arguments.
So when you are saying that, oh, I didn't like Hume back then, compared to what other philosophers?
Well, you got to understand, like when I was, first getting interested in philosophy, I wanted to do all the like, the cool stuff. I wanted to read like
Deleuze.
Like, yeah, exactly. You know what I'm talking about. And so I was like, oh, Hume, he's just some like nerd or something like that. But no, yeah, he's very cool. And I wanted to get more into him since then. I also wanted to take this class because I was technically in your last seminar, the Husserl one.
Yes,
but I
of
was
course,
like,
yes.
Very much not connected to anything happening. I had to be working the whole time during every class. So I'd like,
I know, I remember.
Yeah, I had that crazy job. I was like delivering beer across the city while I was listening.
Yes.
But I don't have to do that anymore. So
great, magnificent. No, that's great. No, yes, I mean, look, Hume, of course, I'm going to read some stuff about what Hume thinks about himself, precisely because you're really, I'm not autobiographical sort of person, say, well, whatever you think about yourself, essentially translate your philosophy, except that this guy's, what he thinks about himself translates to his sort of philosophy.
Yeah, I remember there's that whole part in the beginning of Hume's inquiry where he's like, talking
Yes, and
about,
also
like,
in dialogues. He's a fundamentally, I mean, you know that he's like kind of a revolutionary sort of person. I mean, he was in conversation with Jean-Jacques fucking Rousseau.
Yeah.
Right? He invited Rousseau to England, except that it didn't go well. You know?
Yeah.
You don't go to Britain, the Great Britain, without a little bit of a damage. That is, you know, completely understandable. Yes, no, Hume is a fundamentally interesting person. And to be honest with you, his prose is not actually dry. It's just diamond bullet.
Yeah, that was another
You
thing.
see in the Apocalypse Now, when Marlon Brando, Colonel Kurtz says that, you know, I was shot right here with a diamond bullet. This is Hume's philosophy.
Yeah. No, I that was when I read the course description and I saw that line, I was like, that's exactly right. Like Hume's prose is just so like, he just like gets you right in the face. It's great.
Yes, yes.
Anyway.
Thank you so much. My dear sir, Mstislav.
Okay. My name is Mstislav. I'm from Ukraine, now residing at Madeira, Portugal. So I have taken this seminar because firstly, I like the way that you, Reza, tackle the problem of human induction in your work in intelligence and spirit. And secondly, I have never thought that, Husserl would well us in the aiding in understanding of Hume. There was surprise to me.
Yes, yes. Look, the mysteries of philosophy are unfathomable. Anything can happen for whatever weird reason, or perhaps for nothing, for no reason at all, nothing can happen. This is just philosophy. Like, it's just like this sort of horizon that majority of students of philosophy come to this discipline expecting too much, right? It's just like, you know, I have actually an analogy for this. It's like soldiers going to the battlefield, right? Majority of the time that they do stuff in the battlefield, it's just boring. It's nothing happening. There is no war. But then suddenly, in one moment, you see the battle. The adrenaline rushes, everything goes in slow motion. And this is what philosophy is. Yes, Husserl and Hume are just buddies. Literally, Husserl read the treatise from cover to cover. And Husserlian method is just the reinvention of the Humean method. People don't know that.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Aaron, dear friend.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron. I'm also coming to you from New York. And yeah, I'd repeat some of what Mstislav said. I thought I was signing up for a class on Hume, and it looks like it's a class on Husserl.
And I'm pretty sure that there will be Freudian slip between Husserl and Hume in this class.
And it all comes together, yes. Well, I'm here to see which how the next turn in the dialectic goes. And also, I guess my interest in Hume, or my presuppositions about Hume would be that this was mostly about skepticism. I'm interested in sort of.
You're against skepticism?
Not against skepticism in terms of.
Don't tell me that you're Ray Brazier team when it says that skepticism. What was it? What was it? The sentence? Skepticism is a debilitation of thought. It is not interesting or actually philosophical. Well, no, skepticism is interesting. You cannot simply, sweep it under the goddamn carpet. You have to overcome it.
Yeah, I think particularly skepticism about practical reasons. So I'm looking forward to that that text on practical Pyrrhonism, and also the sort of the relationship between philosophy and psychology is the other thing.
The problem with Hume skepticism is historically. There are so many stuff that have been written about that sort of stuff. It is not essentially Pyrrhonic skepticism 101, right? It's not really radical skepticism. It is actually what you might call to be, what is it, academic mitigated skepticism by way of sexus empiricus. And except that Hume reinvents this skepticism. The skepticism as a way in, the problem out. So we have different sort of skepticism in history of philosophy. Skepticism in, skepticism out. Skepticism in, metaphysics out, right? A skepticism in, problem out. Hume belongs to the third category.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it, definitely.
Love you. So Marco can't actually do anything at this point. Michael?
Hello, I'm Michael. I have a background in computer science and I'm a software engineer. I'm kind of only vaguely aware of Hume as a troublemaker with Hume's fork in Kant and the problem of induction and whether the universe is computable, that kind of thing. I also never really wrapped my head around empiricism, so I'm looking forward to filling in some of all that background in this course.
If you didn't wrap your head around empiricism, what sorts of philosophical field you were?
I'm kind of probably most influenced by psychoanalysis and I don't know, some kind of loosey-goosey version of cybernetics. And I have been studying some German idealism more recently. So I don't know.
Okay. I see. So one of the main goals of this course is to show that, look, there is nothing to be ashamed of, to be allied with a skepticism, with rationalism, with empiricism, and psychology. That's essentially what Hume's problem is, the riddle. Thank you so much, by the way. Benedetto? Benedetto? Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes. Benedetto wrote something on the chat box if you want to look at it. Arman?
Hey.
Yeah, in the garden now.
in the garden now, indeed. I'm Arman, a science fiction writer from Iran. I'm here mostly to follow the path of past seminars, as Aaron and Cislav and other guys and people mentioned. And that's it. Why Hume? Not specifically for Hume, but as I said, I'm here for the art of the dialectics, as Aaron put it. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Love you. So Ionis also, Lane, great to have you here, by the way.
Hi, nice to meet you again.
Yes, yes.
Well, this time I'm actually only more or less observing because I will have lots of classes and work during the lecture time. I'm currently doing my master's in computer music and still working on this topic of time. So I don't have any relations to Hume so far, and I'm curious.
We are going to talk about time, about series, about associations. And I think that absolutely is going to be, a little bit challenging. Yes. Why is that all Germans are interested in the problem of time? You tell me.
I think
it is the greatest problem in philosophy. Love you to have you here back with us, and thank you so much. So, Kirsten.
Hi, I'm actually just auditing, but okay. Just also following up on the Husserl, I guess, which I audited as well. And I liked Cassia bringing in the xenofeminists, a little bit a different perspective, where I feel always I'm coming from a different planet. I don't know how to say that, from somewhere else. When I listening into your classes, which are very white male Eurocentric dominated. So
except that I'm not white male Eurocentric though.
Maybe you got into it. I have no idea. So but yeah, I mean, I studied all this stuff. Hume actually we read in high school in Gymnasium in Germany. So that's a long time ago, but I remember the treatise. And but it's also, when I studied then later in the early 2000s, was very dominated by the canon of the white male Eurocentric philosophers. So I'm interested.
When you were saying white male Eurocentric philosopher,
that's just
no,
like
I completely understand that. No, I completely understand. No. I mean, there is no apologies here. But I really genuinely would like that in your idea, what would be the trajectory, the historical trajectory of philosophy? I mean, well, philosophy is majority of white male, right? And it's only now becoming renegotiated and so on and so forth. But in your mind, what would be the canonical, what you might call to be trajectory of white male philosophy in Europe?
What do you mean, like towards the future or towards the past? I'm like not quite sure.
No, from the past toward the future, that you can recognize that, look, there is a certain sort of trajectory that is fundamentally involved with that sort of upbringing, ideology, and so on and so forth.
Right. I'm not really sure if I understand your question, or what
is it German idealism that is white male? Or German, is it empiricism?
All of it.
All of it. All of it. And that's a great answer. No, I mean, I completely understand that philosophy has always been a fundamentally male-centric discipline. Of course, white male discipline, right? But I think that it is not really a great idea to flatten all distinctions between all philosophical movements by merely one trick, that they're all white male. Well, there is goddamn philosophy, you know, has been. Hopefully we are going to change it, but I don't think it's going to change anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand, and I'm not disagreeing with you. That's why I'm still listening to your seminars to hear where the openings are, you know, where one can slide in and break it open.
You know, I mean, that's the curse of philosophy, I would say. That's the curse of philosophy. And literally, at this point, you either, you know, kind of bite on the cyanide pill, accept everything that has happened, accept the genealogy of philosophy, and then philosophy perhaps doesn't make any sense at that point. And then you have to go to sociology and all sorts of stuff. But from my perspective as an outsider, no, philosophy does actually make a difference. And yes, of course, we always need to complement all these sorts of stuff with the critique of socioeconomic, you know, elements that have made philosophy to be thus and so, you know, white male, European, American, Anglo-Saxon, whatever.
Right.
I mean, it's there is escape here at this point.
No, I mean, it's also maybe a question of identification, what one can read and identify with. I mean, that's very mainstream. I understand this, but like how one can understand it in one's own experience, you know.
Yes.
And build the relationship.
But this is one of my things, and now we are getting into a very challenge before even the class begins. And I love this. I love this. I totally cherish challenges. If it was the case that we could simply identify by way of our own experience, reading philosophy, then philosophy would be just the organon of pure individualism.
Mm-hmm.
Except that philosophy is supposed to be the organon of the individuation, the critique of the individual. Yes. Oh.
Well, you could argue that it is an individual, or how do you call it, organon? I don't know.
The organon, yeah, the organon of individual. No, I mean, this is, I mean, look, there is absolutely no, I don't think that any philosopher can at this point defend this whole idea that, well, you know, no, philosophy is actually quite a diverse sort of discipline. No, it is not. Simple as that. But does this need to be simply flattened with the idea that philosophy in its ambitions is purely an individualistic racial enterprise? I don't think so. I think that we have to distinguish between the socio-historical critique of philosophy and then the critique of philosophical systems. And yes, they do complement one another, but at degrees, in gradations, in graduations. Yes, oh my God. Now we have a problem on our hand. Maybe we should cancel this whole class now. Love you. Magnificent, magnificent, Kirsten. Thank you so much. So who else?
And the next one is Arki St. George.
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, assuming you can hear me. Yes, I'm auditing this class. Thank you for allowing me to be part of the panel. Interesting introductions. I'm an artist and currently attempting to restart my study of philosophy. So this to me is all introductory and new, and yeah, I'm interested in getting anything out of Hume or the other people talked about, and tangentially also interested in the ideas of personhood and the rights of AI. So yeah.
Right. That's magnificent. That's magnificent. Excellent. I mean, we are going to talk about the concept of identity in Hume at some point. Of course, the concept of identity in Hume doesn't really apply exclusively to, personhood, but it does. But the range of identity arguments, numerical or otherwise, can apply to any sort of thing, bodies, objects, so on and so forth. And that is actually one of the main, I would say, arguments of Hume. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Matthias.
Hi, my name is Matthias. I'm speaking from south of France, and I come from a background in literature and computer science. And I graduated last year from the art school in Geneva, where my attempt in a master thesis was to make more of a theory as an aesthetic than theory of an aesthetic. And yeah, its main locus was like the trope of the damsel in distress. It was called unhinged damselicism. Yeah, and the conclusion was that loops kind of falter into loopholes. And I don't really know why Hume, but because of, yeah, I ascribe to the damsel some kind of methodological inference between induction and deduction. Maybe there's something there.
I see. Well, we're going to talk about this next session, that you see, there is a fundamental change in Hume's work from the treatise on human understanding, and to the first inquiry on human understanding. The second inquiry, is it the first one? The first inquiry is the one on understanding. The second one, if I'm not mistaken, it's the one on principle of morals, EPM. So Hume, while in the treatise, make fun of metaphysicians, right? He goes to actually put forward a whole system of metaphysics in the inquiries, right? And what is actually very interesting here is that this move can be also thought about the transformation from the moves of inference from induction to deduction. So essentially, whereas Descartes moved from dogmatic rationalist to a softened, sophisticated, and then a naturalistic rationalism at the end of his life, Hume moves the other direction from a purely methodological naturalism by way of induction, right, experimental method, to a deductive system of metaphysics. And in that sort of grand scope of things, they're fundamentally complementary. It shows the permutations of philosophical systems ultimately to us. So whereas Descartes starts with prescription, then moves toward description and explanation, Hume moves from purely description in the vein of Newtonian explanatory sciences to prescriptive methods of morality and metaphysics, which he deems to be under the banner or jurisdiction of deductive systems. And this is like the later works, the inquiries.
Yeah, looking forward.
Thank you so much. So who else? Paula? No, Paula. Did Paula? I think Paula talked.
Yeah, she
I
talked about it.
already did it, yes.
The last one is Max.
Hi, Reza. Yes, I'm interested in knowing more about the relationship between empiricism and rationalism. And also I've been somewhat fascinated by this Bay Area rationalist community in the past months and how they try to reason optimally, or how they use probabilistic reasoning in general. And Hume is, of course, a kind of hero for them, or kind of starting point for this kind of reasoning. So I'm looking forward, definitely.
Love you, Max. Yes, so this is what they think they are doing, though, in AI community. Except that literally Hume thinks these are all goddamn illusions. This is the Humean skepticism of the worst kind. Hume literally, particularly in the book 1 of the treatise on human nature, literally thinks that any sort of arguments, first of all, he's not talking about truth, right? And that goes well with these AI people. But the things I think that these AI people can't get is because Hume literally does not believe in philosophical sort of way that these are anything but illusions. Some illusions should be taken for granted. Some others need to be purged, right? To be disillusioned. So the sort of empiricism that these people do actually, promote, I would say it's not really Humean. It's Berkeleyan. And Hume's philosophy was constructed to reinvent and also criticize Berkeley, but also to a certain sort of degree Locke's philosophy of empiricism. Hume, to a great degree, is someone who thinks that regular philosophy is just like a system of trickeries, of illusions. No sort of principles can be derived from, canonical philosophy. And the only way to move forward, and I will talk about this, this is the Humean method, is by way of stepping into the most bothersome, into the most shady problems of philosophy. At that point, the shadiest problems of philosophy are just two things: a skepticism, whether of the Pyrrhonic tradition or sexus empiricus tradition, and solipsism. And essentially, Hume begins his philosophy with both of these, only to overcome them. Hume is essentially a solipsistic philosopher of ultimate degree. Before even Descartes, I mean, majority of people think that Descartes is a solipsistic philosopher. No, Hume, by way of his method, is a solipsistic philosopher, and also fundamentally a skeptic philosopher. But the whole point is that he wants to take the bull of a skepticism and solipsism by its goddamn horns and tame it. Not to give them any more maneuver, any more room that they are deserved. Whereas AI at this point tries to actually unleash the bull in the arena of a skepticism and solipsism. So, that was the introduction. Let's have, I mean, was that the introduction? Do we have any other person? Any of our good students? Okay, let's have 7 minutes break, refreshments, and then come back and I will start the session. Let me know when everyone is ready. In the meantime, if anyone wants to say something, about my...
I was thinking, like you said that Hume. No, actually, I was reading in Moll's text that Hume precludes the possibility of doubting the existence of the external world, and Descartes actually does that. But there's this quarrel, like this discussion of whether like the hyperbolical doubt posed by Descartes is like a methodological resource that
Yes.
he's actually like I was questioning myself about the difference of like an effective act of doubting and like you incorporate like explicitly the doubt as a methodological resource.
Yes. So from a historical perspective, you see Descartes introduces doubt. And of course, the account of doubts in Descartes changes from early periods to what I said, the Leiden period, like at the end of his life, where he adopts a kind of naturalistic rationalism. And if we were going to give a kind of course, with a little bit of maneuvering and softening, massaging the concepts and different phases of Descartes' work, Descartes' account of doubt is methodological. In fact, it is considered to be the method itself, right? What is the definition of doubt, a la Descartes? It would be a medium for depletion and augmentation of objectivity. Doubt is a medium for depletion and augmentation of objectivity. Now, the reason that Descartes talks about doubt in this sort of manner is precisely because doubt during his time is fundamentally linked to the idea of perception. That doubting percepts is a method to either deplete perceptions of their objectivity, rendering them as if they were illusions or delusions, or rendering them as perceptions, something that can be objectively talked about, right? Hume goes a little bit further, precisely because he doesn't talk about really doubts. He's quite careful about this sort of stuff, but he does try to reinvent the methodology of doubt on probabilistic terms. And we are going to talk about that. It's not the probabilistic terms in the way that we are talking about probabilistic logics or in modern sense, but it's quite very, very interesting innovation. The idea of doubt, however, in this sort of tradition comes to its kind of climax by way of Mach, Brentano, Husserl, and Boltzmann, where doubt now is being understood as fragmentation of perception, a quantitative fragmentation of perception, such that from a probabilistic standpoint, we would be able to see whether a perception or a percept can deplete its objectivity on quantitative terms, or rather augment it, the sense of objectivity in quantitative terms. And this has something to do with a very, we are not talking about qualities. If you see, when we are talking about quantitative fragmentation of perception, we are not talking about qualities at this point. This has something to do with the historical background of this sort of discourse. Now, at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of 20th century, precisely because in the history of science, among the physicists who were working back then, philosopher physicists, so to speak, from an ontological perspective, there is no difference between quantitative and qualitative. So all perceptions can be regarded in quantitative terms, doubt in a statistical probabilistic sense, because at the level of the statistical matrix, there is no, from an ontological standpoint, there is no difference between quantitative degrees and qualitative degrees. The difference only arises at epistemological and phenomenological terms. And you get the sorts of ideas today that, well, there are sentients out there, termites, coral reefs. They're all like us. Non-humans, good non-humans, swear to God. But that misses a really central point in this critical discussion, that yes, they are like to us, absolutely, by any means possible, at the level of ontology. But at the level of ontology, you cannot talk about the difference between quantitative and qualitative, between mere sentience and rational consciousness. It would be absurd even to talk about such sort of topics. Their differences that are important and make differences can only be talked about at the level of epistemological and phenomenological concerns. And this would be, Husserlian take on Hume's philosophy to show that, yes, absolutely, under no condition, we cannot distinguish between a hypothetical machine, an AI, and a, what you might call to be a human agent, a rational agent. It would be as absurd to assign the term consciousness to the machine as it is to assign it to a human agent. It just doesn't work at the level of ontological distinction, because ontological distinction knows no distinction from a mechanistic point of view, a statistical, probabilistic, mechanistic point of view. Yet, as we have seen it today in this whole post-humanist quagmire, they want to flatten the distinction between human and non-human by flattening the distinction between various categories of discernment or differentiation or distinction. That would be ontological, epistemological, and phenomenological. once you turn everything to an ontological discourse, yes, everything becomes flattened. But if you reserve the indistinction at the level of ontology, which is quite actually very interesting from a mechanistic perspective, but reserve their true distinctions at the level of epistemology and phenomenology, then there would be a far more coherent discourse to talk about the human and coral reefs or my old socks, right? I like Graham Harman.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any comments before I move forward?
I guess I have a question also, but you might
You
answer.
always have a question, my dear
I know.
friend. I love you. That's why I love you to have you in the class. Always.
But yeah, I guess just starting off with approaching Hume phenomenologically, right?
Yeah.
If that's what we're doing, I guess
we are not going to talk, you see, phenomenology here. It's a very strange sort of term, because you see, since before Brentano, in fact, we had the term phenomenology. Then Brentano, then Husserl criticized fundamentally Brentano, then Merleau-Ponty. So phenomenology needs to be bracketed in a very Husserlian sense. What I mean by this, it's something like this, and let me read this for you. The psychologism, you see, because Hume is into a certain sort of deep understanding of psychology. The psychologism of Humean philosophy is essentially of a new type, for it tries to trace back all the sciences to the source of all foundations. This new type of psychology can be termed a pure ecology, right? We cannot even talk about psychologism in the sense that Frege has been criticizing it. Well, of course we can, because there are certain sorts of stuff that needs to be criticized. And Husserl credits Hume of having conceived a systematic science of pure consciousness. Such a science has to deal with the pure given in the field of consciousness. It is a tabula rasa psychology, which by performing a radical suspension and bracketing and doubt of all judgments would deal only with what is immediately given to the consciousness. Hume's treatise, according to Husserl, actually, is an attempt at a universal plan with the elements of constitution, nothing more, nothing less. It is the first and the concrete immanent theory of knowledge. And the great achievements of treatise on, of human understanding does not lie so much in logically showing the skeptical consequences of Locke-Berkeley tradition, but mainly in its conception of an immanent naturalism, pointing at a radical psychologism, which is pure ecology of thinking or ideas.
I mean, so that was precisely my question, the psychologism question, right? And I'm trying to grapple with it. It's more, I mean, I guess just the traditional reading of Hume, as far as I know it, is that he's coming up with an account of human nature, right?
A science of human nature.
Styles of human nature.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Precisely because of the immanent. You see, psychologism at this point is not just ideas. It's an immanent field of ideas. Ideas can be quite psychologistic and under the axe of Frege's attack at this point. And also Husserl, because Husserl even was more anti-psychologistic than Frege. So the whole point is turning it upside down, this problem, by making psychology a pure psychology, ecology of immanence.
Yeah, I think I'll chew it over. Well,
we will talk about this, but yeah. I mean, we are getting a little bit flash forwarding, but that's great. That's magnificent. That's yes, this is something that is quite puzzling with regard to Hume among all philosophers. That why does Hume want to do that? Well, I would say translate this question, why Hume does want to this sort of a stupid maneuver, right? In the vein of what comes after him, the transcendental turn. I would translate it to what sort of methods does he have at his disposal to establish the immanent train, an immanent psychology, a pure ecology. Obviously, from the standpoint of Hume, and this is how the seminar starts. All philosophy has always been in great tensions. You see, it is so easy to invent a philosophical system, whether you are a rationalist or a canonical and classical empiricist, a speculative philosopher or a transcendental philosopher, the cult of the critique or the cult of a speculation. Yeah. So far as you have determined the field, the constraints of moving forward, everything is a piece of cake. You're not doing philosophy at this point. You're just errant boys and girls moving forward the premises of your illusions to ultimate degree. But then what would be a true philosophical method? And this is where Hume comes and delivers the diamond bullet into every philosopher's forehead. The whole method is simply like this, that we are not going to relinquish the tensions between all these various philosophical fields and methods, whether we are going to incorporate them as they are. So, Hume then becomes a chimera, a hydra of philosophy, not even a sphinx, insofar as is a methodological naturalist. I'm going to talk in next sessions about the meaning of what it means to be a methodological naturalist, as opposed to just a mere naturalist philosopher, right? A methodological naturalist a skeptic of both Pyrrhonian and academic mitigated skepticism, which is basically sexus empiricus. And also a goddamn fucking metaphysician of the ultimate degree. So within these tensions between, which basically constitute a great swath of philosophy, skepticism, naturalism, metaphysics, they already have conquered a great swath of philosophical methods. And through this sort of tensions, then he wants to be a philosopher who creates other sorts of tensions between reasons and causes, between description and prescription. And yes, David Hume does actually deliver prescriptions. He's not merely a descriptive philosopher, as so many people have commented or have said that, well, you know, this is just like a descriptive stuff. No, Hume is fundamentally also, at another pole, is a prescriptive philosopher. And hence also the tension between normativity and sensationalism or impressionism, in the Humean sense of impressions, and so on and so forth. So imagine that a philosopher who makes a system, not by following premises of a philosophical system and how you should set up a philosophical system based on certain sort of premises, and then from that you go the task of systematization and then come to the final conclusion and so on and so forth. No, his problem is fundamentally different. His philosophy should be read differently than so many other philosophers, just like unlike Kant and, you know, I would say that German idealism. His problem, his way of philosophizing, is by way of truly pluralizing, always in conflict, the methods of philosophization. He does not actually make philosophy by way of conflicting premises, but no, he wants to systematize philosophy as a science by way of systematically incorporating methods which are at odds with one another. Skepticism, empiricism, rationalism, so on and so forth. And that is the enigma. But I wouldn't say that it's an enigma. It's an enigma to those, as Hume said, armchair philosophers. This should be philosophy 101, you know, that we are not going to make a system of philosophy simply by accepting some sort of grounds or premises, or maybe if you are very generous, make some conflicting premises and then creating certain sort of consequences and conclusions out of them. No, we are going to make philosophy by way of conflicting methods of philosophy. So then you get, sorry, yes, please.
Sorry. It was a quick question, but I guess it can wait.
No, please go on, please go on. Kasia?
Sorry, I was muted. I was thinking about how these methods of like this position of grouping different methods that conflicting with each other, like in a conjunctive way, is related to a position akin to Goodman's irrealism that does not adjudicate between these positions, but still.
Okay, very great comment. Yes. I wouldn't say that Hume is a realist, but definitely Hume and Goodman share a great sort of what you would call platform. In the sense that, you see, one of the things is that when you see, task of philosophy, the task of modeling, in fact, of the world and ourselves in it, was always supposed to be methodologically plural. Not in a kind of postmodernist pluralism, but a system of ranking of methods and how they can actually come and interact with one another, conflict with one another, such that we can actually make a system. Because how are you going to make a system? Like literally, there is no such a system without a method. And system making, that was who is that? God, I'm getting dementia at this point. No, Kantian philosopher who wrote the work System. Aaron, can you help me a little bit on this? The no Kantian one, Jesus, I'm just literally getting amnesia. One second, my apologies. One sec. Just going through my notes and stuff. Heinrich Rickert. Rickert was this Neo-Kantian philosopher who's probably can be deemed as the father of philosophy of science at this point. His idea was the idea of the system. How do we create a system, right? Systems cannot be made from premises to consequence in a straight logical formation. But rather, systems are supposed to be made from conflicting methodologies. And this was the doctoral thesis of Rickert, From Chaos to System. Right? So, and before that, it was Hume's idea, and he got it from Hume, that, you see, a certain sort of pluralism of not ideas, a la postmodernism and that sort of jazz, but a certain sort of pluralism of methodologies, ranked, controlled, constrained, and distributed according to their valence, is needed to create a system of philosophy, a science of philosophy, in fact. And yes, when we do that sort of, systematization of methodology, then I think that the picture of philosophy as we know it, being always kind of very conservative, very deluded, goes away. Because philosophy at that point truly becomes a science. Pluralism, controlled, not pluralism in the sort of wishy-washy sort of way, but the controlled pluralism of methodologies of inquiry. And that was literally the aim of Humean philosophy. And so as Descartes, I would say. Except that Hume did something to philosophy no other philosophy has ever done. He makes explicit that philosophy is nothing but conjunctions of methods. And within that sort of area, when you do this, obviously you arrive at some goddamn mind-blowing sort of philosophical conclusions. Let me read this. How fucked up the conclusions that Hume at the end of his life come up with, right? So, there are so many notes in this book. I always work assiduously for my classes, except that these notes are not mine, it's a used book. So, this is what Hume says. Anything may produce anything. Creation, annihilation, motion, reason, volition, all these may arise from one another or from any other object we can imagine, nor will this appear strange if we compare two principles explained above, that the constant conjunction of objects determines their causation. And that properly speaking, no objects are contrary to each other, but existence and non-existence, where objects are not contrary, nothing hinders them from having that constant conjunction on which the relation of cause and effect totally depends. So anything may produce anything, precisely because of this methodology that Hume has at this point, right? Pluralism of the methods of philosophy. This follows from components 2, that it is only through the observed absence of constant conjunctions that we can determine that causal relations do not obtain between specified objects, creation, annihilation, motion, reason, volition. All these may arise from one another or from any other object we can imagine. Now consider some of the permutations. A, motion may cause motion, contrary to those claim to demonstrate that there cannot be causes other than God. B, motion may cause volition, and vice versa, contrary to those who claim to demonstrate that mind-body interaction cannot obtain. C, motion may cause annihilation, contrary to those who claim to demonstrate that physical change in the human body cannot cause the annihilation of the soul. So you see, once you adopt a systematic methodological pluralism, anything is now possible. Philosophy fundamentally ascends to its proper position. At one pole, a conservative, rationalist empiricist, a la Nathan Brown, discipline, but at one point, a skeptical, a speculative discipline, a science of all sciences. Max?
Oh yeah. So I have a question, which is like I hope it's a stupid question and you will dispel it.
No, don't worry. There's no such thing as a stupid question. There are only questions. There are stupid answers, but there is no such thing as a stupid question.
Wait for it. Like, maybe there is. But so this methodological pluralism, the immediate thing that blocks me out of it is 2 + 2 = 4, right? So it's an insight that it's not just it equals 4 and not 4.00000001, right? But also it equals 4 for me and for you and for everybody else. And we know that it equals 4 exactly, and we also know what exactly means intuitively. Like, so basically it's a very deep insight, and it is a singular insight. So there's nothing of the type of this insight.
Right.
Nothing else, nothing that I could think of. So then for pluralism, how does that connect? So the question is then, any proposal of methodological pluralism, how would it correspond to this insight? So it's either grounded in it, and then it's not really pluralism. It's more like different perspectives on the same thing. Or it's
satellite perspective, like you know, when a satellite takes snapshots of the Earth and they have slices of pictures of this planet, right? We call it satellite perspectivism. Like you move around a whole of a train or a subject and you take snapshots, and then you integrate these snapshots into a stereoscopic picture of the planet, right?
Then how much is it a pluralism? So what?
So pluralism here is not, as I mentioned, it's not pluralism of ideas. It's pluralism of methods of inquiry. And we should understand why Hume fundamentally changed treatise of human nature and replace it with 2 fundamental inquiries. So all there is into philosophy is methods of inquiry, right? So a skepticism is one. I'm going to say what sort of a skepticism it is. Then there would be a kind of, you know, inquired by way of Descartian, early Descartian or middle Descartian inquiry about the nature of reason, about how rules are being generated and how we inquire into the nature of rules by way of rules. And then other sorts of methods. So Hume really just, the idea of methodological pluralism that he puts forward is literally not about ideas or premises, as I mentioned, but rather modes of inquiry. Like, think about this. If I'm going to make a very sort of, reductive Copernican allegory about this, think about this, that a low orbit satellite is going to get certain sort of snapshots of certain sort of qualities, a sort of characteristics when it revolves around the Earth, right? A high orbit satellite gets different sort of pictures. Then you have a different sort of a spaceship that goes beyond the high orbit. It gets, into interplanetary motions. And then it takes different snapshots of the Earth, where basically we see that, oh my God, not only Earth is not flat, not only Earth is like this, but also Earth is following the elliptical motions of planets. Think about this, that this sort of methodology is following a very canonical sense of Copernican revolution, from Copernicus to Kepler and Newton. Each of them are right, except that they have different slices by way of their methods of doing things, different slices or snapshots of what this planet is, right? What the world is. And then ultimately, once you combine them together, you say that, well, all these methodologies, despite their initial conflicts from, even let's say from Ptolemaic, from a geocentric to a heliocentric to a galactic, and then from a Newtonian one, they have something in common. And now we can integrate them by virtue of such commonalities, creating a stereoscopic image of what this planet is, how it moves, how it behaves, what is positioned among the celestial bodies. So this is an allegory of the methodologies that Hume wants to actually deploy, precisely because he thinks in his own mind the sort of skepticism that he cherishes, sort of methodological naturalism, empiricism, metaphysics, that there is a commonality between them, even though these methodologies are fundamentally made to address fundamentally different sorts of problems. But once we integrate them into a system, and that would be the Humean method, then we get a stereoscopic picture of the nature of man. Freya.
Well, I think you basically just answered my question, because I was just wondering, in plurality of methods, what because you also said that there's like a purpose to philosophy, to Hume, nonetheless, even though there's this plurality of methods. And I was just wondering what that could be. But I reckon if it's a sort of kaleidoscopic approach or image, I mean
telescopic,
okay, because I think, or I just find it really different to, on the one hand, because it's inherently like non-theological, right? If you have all of these different methods that point to different directions, and nonetheless there seems to be a need to still do philosophy. And I was just wondering why, or where does he get his motivation or his justification for philosophy from?
You see, that is, we are running out of time, but the thing about Hume is, it's not just Husserl, other sort of philosophers have considered him to be an anti-philosopher. And there are good reasons to think about Husserl as a philosopher, anti-philosopher. Like, you know, what was it in Terminator 3? Oh my God, we have got a anti-Terminator, right? So he's an anti-philosopher, meaning that he just does not believe in the way that regular philosophers make a system of philosophy is correct. And obviously, a great deal of, you know, how he does this, the motivations behind this anti-philosopher comes from the revolutions of Boyle and Newton, and how he has to adjust a system of philosophy. The philosophy cannot be just this sort of, you know, rationalist or empiricist, or even rationalist empiricist, speculative transcendental critique, and that sort of jazz that is unfortunately being inherited by the legacy of Kant, orthodox Kantianism, not Kant himself. So he has to renegotiate the boundaries of philosophy, essentially, precisely because he sees that, look, with the advance, with the progress of sciences, most probably philosophy is going to get abolished. So how can we actually reinvent philosophy by way of methods such that then philosophy becomes ever more powerful, such that we can say that, look, philosophy is the springboard of all sciences. And that's his ambition. Most probably he didn't achieve it coherently, but nevertheless is the one who attempted at that sort of ambition. And my God, it is truly a magnificent sort of ambition. So did you read Nathan Brown's introduction on rationalist empiricism? Freya, I think you are mute.
Was that the text for today?
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
I didn't.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically only the introduction, not the
Yeah,
rest of
the
the
introduction. What do you think of it?
I don't know. I don't really think I understood enough of it. I basically skipped once through. I can't really make a good statement.
That is a very caressing sort of critique. Yes, Nathan Brown. But I mean, it's a magnificent sort of introduction. I think it's just incoherent. If philosophy is going to get unbound in its ambitions, then why to actually create a pleonasm called rationalist empiricism? Like as if rationalism wasn't empirical enough, or empiricism was not rationalist enough. And all that comes to this whole idea that philosophers literally think that the consequences of philosophical system are more important than the methods of construction of philosophical systems. All the sort of technicity, theoretical, practical, or otherwise, axiological, go into that sort of stuff. And it's kind of like an ad hoc lip service to philosophy, really. I mean, it's not really interesting to me, is it?
Well, it certainly makes it more interesting to read the introduction again under that premise.
Come on.
Hey, so maybe I just want to double check whether I answered you correctly. And maybe with the following question, I want to ask whether Hume has a answer to my question from your point of view. So when you mentioned about the satellites, and I think
my apologies, certain what?
Satellites, that the images when you take snapshots of the
Oh,
Earth, let's
satellites.
say.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Snapshots.
Yeah, and then in this example, I get the impression that we are literally talking about, we are observing something which is ontologically complete, and we go to higher unity, we get a better and better understanding of it. Let's say someone might argue that, for example, in science, one can do that because you start with the, let's say, Newtonian classical physics, and then you go to Einsteinian relativity. There is always kind of in a certain limit, there is kind of a convergence in approaches, and what you get is kind of like a higher and higher unity, and then you go to let's say quantum mechanics, and then at a certain approach, it's very when with the higher bodies you actually converge to classical physics, but when you go to the subatomic particles, you have a different view, and so on. But in philosophy, I get the impression that this kind of a unification, or that might not really occur. What I mean is that there might be some kind of a fundamental irreducibility, let's say, between Deleuze and Hegel, and these method of pluralities that in philosophy, in some sense, doesn't really seem to me very convergible, or to, let's say, sciences, because how we really reconcile Deleuze and Hegel, there seems to be kind of a fundamental irreducibility there. Maybe maybe you have a different interpretation of Hume, or how Hume would fit into this picture.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Kemal, the thing, I think that Hume and, of course, Descartes, Leiden period Descartes, not early Descartes, absolutely don't think that the totality of appearances are given to us, right? Not only appearances, but also ontology. And it's a task of philosophy to piecewise, by creating ever more sophisticated techniques, methods of inquiry, and perhaps even rules to, reveal is not a good word, but I mean, for the lack of a better word, to reveal slices of the universe, right? Of the entirety of ontology. But it is not as if they actually think that the ontology is complete. So that's why I said that, well, this example is very reductive. And Hume absolutely, under no condition, thinks that the ontological realm is something that finalizes, the totality of which is given to us. And we are merely, photographers or stamp collectors about this universe. No. They want to say that, look, and that psychologism thing comes about, where I'm going to talk about next week, about the whole project of the treatise on of human understanding. That no, that's not how knowledge works, philosophical or otherwise, precisely because we have to suspend any notion of the totality of the universe, ontological or otherwise, before moving in a genuine philosophical, trajectory to look at what is happening. But I understand that many people today, in the vein of new humanism, and there are so many of them, Dandanet, even probably Strawson, who go into that sort of direction, that as if, you see, we are saying as if here. And as if has always been Hume's main component in philosophy. As if we have, the totality of a stable ontology, and then we are merely the stamp collecting, taking a snapshot of that. But as if, when we are saying as if, we are talking about fictionalism, right? We are not in the business of delusions of philosophy anymore, but rather anti-philosophical philosophy. That, yes, majority of these stuff are fictions. Fictions that can be scrutinized, that can be either deflated or accepted. And Hume doesn't want to simply say that, well, this is just the totality of the ontological universe or universum, and then we are just doing this, launching by way of different methods, shooting snapshots at it. No, he wants to say, precisely because of his psychologism or psychological method, which is tinged with radical skepticism, he wants to say that, no, look, the sort of snapshots that we take from this universum are most probably illusory in the first place. But it's our task as philosophers to look at them. And by way of scrutinizing them systematically, we are going to expand the universe, the realm of ontology. So ontology for Hume is not stable, nor its totality given to him.
Sorry, Reza. Sorry to interrupt, but we have 3 more questions, and I believe you want to wrap up and final
I
segment.
don't need to. I wanted to read some stuff, some Humean humors for you, but well, I'm going to leave it for the next session. Yes, let's take the questions.
I believe it's Pradeep.
Yes, Pradeep.
Sorry. Yeah, I guess first part of my question you've answered. I was thinking about a similar stuff where I could not pinpoint on an example, but I was thinking of some where I was thinking essentially that each methodology presupposes a form of ontology, something that is given and a certain relationship between the things that are given. And therefore, an integration of what kind of integration would be possible based on those relationships is what I was thinking of. A further extension of this, in addition, did you want to sort of respond?
You see, this is a great point that, a methodology presupposes certain sorts of fundamental assumptions, probably of maybe ontological nature. But that is why the riddle of the Hume comes to the forefront. You see, as I said, he's a metaphysician, he's a methodological naturalist, and he's a skeptical philosopher of two kinds: radical Pyrrhonic skepticism and radical sexus empiricus academic mitigated skepticism. The point here is that Hume knows that. Hume knows that methodologies have their own goddamn baggages, assumptions, presuppositions. That's why he wants to introduce the method of skepticism into the organon of philosophy, into the organon of systematization of the works of philosophy, such that he can say that, look, by way of this skepticism, I am going to bracket, in a Husserlian sense, suspend or doubt the assumptions that my methodologies carry over to the consequences. So that is actually the point of the riddle of Hume. To at once understand the importance of methodology, but also inventing a safe trigger to be capable of criticizing the methods of the critique. Kant does not do that. Kant simply abides. In fact, the entire history of transcendental philosophy, in the orthodox sort of vein, they don't have safety guards to challenge the assumptions of the methods, transcendental methods, whereas Hume attempts, perhaps unsuccessfully, to invent a new system of philosophy where the importation of methods comes hand in hand with a scrutiny into the origin of the methods themselves, hence the adoption of various forms of skepticism.
Yeah, that was great. I was thinking on similar lines where a conjunction between understanding of methodologies could also sort of bring in conjunctions of various presuppositions as well. But an extension of the question that I was also asking was, which methodology, how does Hume decide, or how does Hume prescribe us to decide, us as readers to decide which methodologies do you consider?
Should be advantageous. Obviously, we should understand that, look, Hume works as a philosopher in the context of the history of philosophy. So obviously, the methods that he prefers, that he deploys, are the methods, unfortunately, for the good or bad, to which he's accustomed, right? It's not as if he wants to invent a new method to go meta-method on other sorts of methods. No, he's literally wants to say that, look, this is the history of philosophy. I am the child of goddamn philosophy, right? I've got this from Berkeley and Locke. I've got this from Descartes. I've got this from Hobbes. I've got this from this. I've got this from that. He really doesn't have that sort of what you might call to be a system of selections of methods in this certain sort of systematic sense. No, he has methods he has inherited, but now he tries to systematize. renegotiate the relations between such methods. I don't think that it would be wise to say or ask why Hume didn't actually create a system of meta-methods. No, he doesn't have the resources to do that at that point. That sort of questions only come up explicitly and systematically in 20th century.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, please.
So Benedito asked me to read his question on chat is the following. This method of bringing together other methods in what makes Deleuze go in search of Hume or compose schizoanalysis after different repetition. So I believe it is a question of Deleuze going to Hume on this
would you be able
methodology.
to copy paste it on the chat?
Yes.
Chat again?
Yes.
You know, I mean, most probably that was Deleuze's ambition and target. But the moment that we get into a schizoanalysis, right? Pluralism loses its methodological content and becomes simple method itself, right? Precisely because if I'm not wrong, and probably I have a bias about this sort of Deleuzian sort of, things, and, I need to be corrected at this point, but I would say that essentially Deleuze's method is just flattening of the Humean method. It's essentially the abolishment of Humean method from the get-go, precisely because Hume wants to give a system of ranking to these methods, that these are not arbitrary, these are not schizophrenic. That each of them have certain sort of powers, certain sort of constraints, and upon the scrutiny of such powers and constraints, we have to create a system out of them. And that's Hume. But of course, I can understand why Deleuze wants to adopt the Humean pluralism as a platform for a schizoanalysis platform. But I just don't think that it works. It would be a betrayal of Hume. Arman?
Yes, you sort of answered asked my question in your answer to Pradeep, but just to get a better, clearer answer, I would push the question, if you allow me. You talked about the suspending of the notion of ontology, but you know that when we talk about
not suspending the notion of ontology, suspending the commitments
in doubt, in the process of doubt, right? In the process of doubt,
okay.
Yeah, just in the process of doubt, it's suspension of the notion of any notion of ontology, keeps something for certain, as you talked about the assumptions. But I think the assumption is more fundamental than what you talked about. The assumption is the very continuation, or the very continuum, or the very field of translation between these methods of inquiries. We keep it, we take it for given that these are translatable. These can be understood in some way as inquiries, all of them.
These are not translatable, these are transportable.
transportable, yes, transposable. Then maybe the concept,
as I mentioned, you see,
the mapping concept.
Yes, the whole point is that Hume is not really interested in translating, the components of methods, various methods of philosophy, in order to create a system of science of philosophy, but rather to have a weapon system, right? And a weapon open system architecture system that can be, constructed and accommodating new weaponaries. Two, fundamentally scrutinize and inquire about the means of transitions between components of various methods. So you see, this is the safeguard of Humean method. And that's various sorts of skepticism that Hume in his life has adopted.
Sorry, just to cut you off, a quick question: is there a possibility of not transitioning between them? Is there a possibility of transitionability between methods of inquiry?
Yes,
can they exclude each other?
Yeah, of course. That's exactly what Hume wants to say. But the thing is that you see, it's just like a model building, right? So you are going to create a model of the world, right? And yourselves in it. And then this model obviously requires a lot of different sorts of methods, right? And not all of these methods can be simply commensurated. But then you have to have a certain sort of critical idea about how and why certain sort of methods, even when are in conflict and when they are incommensurable, they can nevertheless be integrated to create a system of philosophy, a science of philosophy. And that's essentially Hume's point. And that sort of level of meta-scrutiny for Hume is being achieved by the acts of skepticism of various kinds, not just Pyrrhonic, but also, as I mentioned, academic mitigated skepticism, which I'm going to talk about next week.
And it is a familiarity between this skepticism and something like a ratification, the process of making error right, making right the wrongs, right? This is the capture of skepticism.
Yes. It's not about consistency of the methods. It's about internal coherence. And coherence is a fundamentally different category than that of consistency when we are talking about methods. So he's searching for a method to ratify or verify the internal coherency of methods in order to create a system of science of philosophy. Rowan?
So for Hume, does system always sort of imply like internal, is coherence a necessity for system, or sort of like, I was thinking—
coherency for him is necessary for, see, the whole riddle of Hume is that, why on fucking earth some fucking philosopher needs to deploy so many fucking incommensurable methods, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously Hume's answer would be, look, because I don't look between the consistencies of these methods, I look into the internal coherencies as a precondition, as a condition of possibility, such that I can integrate these methods, create a system that is not of the philosophical kind in the traditional sense of philosophy, but a science of philosophy, a system of science of philosophy. And that requires pluralism.
I see. So how would he sort of evaluate like the system of like Hegelian logic versus like Tarski?
We don't know. I mean, we don't know. I've never seen actually Hume versus Hegel sort of thing. But I mean, that would be very interesting to think about this. I mean, does anyone has any sort of input about a possible dialogue between Hume and Hegel in the science of logic? I don't think that is, you see, oh, Jesus Christ, Almighty Lord.
I was sort of thinking like in sort of like the section about like ground and essence and stuff.
Yes, no, yeah. I mean, there are actually, you see, they are kind of having similar sort of trajectories, but fundamentally different consequences and so on and so forth. I would say that no, I generally don't see how Hume, on the first impression, can have even a morsel of dialogue with Hegel. Because one of the reasons is that Hume is essentially the progenitor to what you might call to be the legacy of transcendental philosophy. He wants to preemptively criticize, give a coherent, systematic critique of the a priori in all of its guises, right? And of course, Hegel doesn't like a priori a la Kant, but nevertheless, he builds on top of it. So these two sort of positions, I don't know how they can actually have what the war between these positions look like. Literally, I've not ever thought about this, like Hume, and we can, it's very easy to think about Kant and Hume, right? Or Kant and Husserl, or Hume and Husserl, and Hume and Descartes, and Hume and Hobbes. But Hume and Hegel, it requires a lot of understanding of how they are actually making the immanence. Precisely because their methods of making immanence and immanence are so different, it would require a lot of thinking to just imagine or envisage a possible sort of dialogue between these two people. Mm-hmm. But it's magnificent sort of, thought experiment.
Yeah, thanks, yeah.
Yes, Maxim.
Yeah, so 2 + 2 = 4 is a rabbit hole. I won't sideline the discussion to that. The answer is go read Frege, basically. But now I can answer why Hume, like the question from the start. Exactly because I hope to suspend ontological commitment that triggers AI angst, among other things. because this is exactly connects to it. It's not that AI will take my job, like it will, but I'm not so scared of that. But is that it's a living reminder that we're just numbers. So it's scary.
You see that Hume has this discussion, and we are going to get into this sort of stuff. Essentially, next after the second session, we are going to move toward three topics essentially: identity, time, and imagination. These are fundamentally interconnected within the work of Hume. By identity, he usually means numerical identity, right? And Hume is that sort of person in philosophy who would say that, well, you know, there are certain things that are granted. We cannot question them, but certainly not goddamn fucking numbers. Like he says this about the body. He says that, well, you know, by body, he means external objects, identities through time. So, you know, bodies, yes, we cannot question them. I think that we just should have lived with them as premises of philosophy. I'm pretty sure that there is a joke of meatbaggery about this. And look, you know, we are all meatbags. It is forced upon us. We don't know anything better. So maybe you should take it for granted, right? That sort of Humean pure skepticism. And when it comes particularly to the idea of number, is fundamentally intuitionistic. He's not Hilbertine. He's Brouwertine. Precisely because of his skeptic sort of way and impressionistic, the idea of sensual impressions and other sort of impressions of reflections, impressions of judgment, impressions of beliefs and emotions, which are different levels of impressions. And that comes to a certain sort of psychologism of a radical kind, as I mentioned, ecology, where basically Hume will say that, well, you know, just like Frege says that, well, you know, numbers are not ideals, they are ideal objective entities. Whereas Hume might actually say that, no, listen to me, you know, they are ideals. But they are ideals precisely because they haven't figured out their exact relations with ideas, namely sensory impressions. And remember, the title of this stupid seminar is called The Impetus of the Soul. Do you know what the impetus of the soul is? Do you know where it is coming from? It's coming from Plato. Let me read this for you. It's actually quite enlightening. So, one second. Let me search this. So this is something that has been going on quite a while in philosophical, history, and except that very few philosophers really genuinely understood what is actually the impetus of the soul, right? Plato was one of the first people who came to this realization that, oh my God, the impetus of the soul is something without which philosophy doesn't exist. So those of you who have access to the first collected works of Plato, there is a section called the definitions, and these definitions are actually made out of the dialogues, right? Platonic dialogues. Sensation is being defined as impetus of the soul, a movement of mind, a heralding of the soul through the body to the seasons of man, from which results the power of the soul, devoid of reason, having a cognizance through the body. That's essentially Hume's fundamental assault, creating a system for the impetus of the soul, how sensation address the seasons of the human. So last question, Pradeep.
Hi, just a short question, I guess. But would you sort of ascribe a similar human goal of creating the science of philosophy to what Foucault did in archaeology of knowledge?
Can you a little bit elaborate on this sort of question? Because it's a little bit, for me, I can answer it, but I want to answer it correctly. I don't, because it's a little bit compressed. Just a little bit of elaboration.
I mean, to sort of show the historicity of where the thought stems from, thought of a particular system, or the a prioris or assumptions of a particular system, to see how they relate to each other.
I mean, Foucaultian genealogy is not really interested that much. Well, maybe in the later lectures, you know, about Stoicism and cynicism, he's not really that much interested in the question of sensation, right? Mm-hmm. But rather about how bodies do interact within a socio-historical, economic, technical world, right?
Right.
So sensation literally for Foucault is already, you see, he's not a philosopher. Foucault is not really a philosopher in the canonical sense of philosophy. He's a philosopher socialist or sociological philosopher. At that point, being a sociological philosopher, a genealogical social philosopher, he can't really address the question of sensation, or in fact body, in a kind of like a philosophical tradition, but he always assumes that these questions smuggle around or somehow being subsumed or assimilated within a field of socioeconomic technical regime. And that is the question of genealogy, you know, for Foucault. I don't think that Hume is not interested in this sort of idea, obviously, because he's like a par excellence philosopher, right? He wants to say that, well, look, no, there are certain sort of components of recognition and abstraction prior to the order of socioeconomic technical assimilation of bodies and sensations, which Foucault talks about.
Yeah, I guess my question sort of arose from my ignorance of what Hume actually talks about. I think that'll be covered in this course, but that was like the question that prompted up because of kind of.
There is obviously, you see, obviously there would be a true battle between, you know, a Humean philosopher, right? Probably a new Humean philosopher and a Foucaultian philosopher, right? Because I think that there is actually a grain of truth to Foucault's thesis that, look, yes, these abstractions, philosophical abstractions about sensation and body are good, great, but precisely because these abstractions are not fundamentally, you know, divided or distanced from the socioeconomic technical regimes of assimilation, then perhaps all philosophical systems of this sort, talking about sensation and body, are reflections of their own phases of socio-historical, economic, and technical assimilations in one way or another. That would be, you know, a canonical genealogical critique that someone who's Foucaultian can levy against, for example, a new Humean. And by new Humean, I don't mean simply analytic new Humeans like a Strawson, but also Deleuze. That would be actually an interesting discussion. I don't know how it might actually, you know, pans out, unfolds, because both of these camps have their own fundamental defenses about, you know, the sort of concepts that they are putting forward. But I would say that yes, Foucault probably, to some degree, is right. Such abstractions definitely have certain sort of connection, not in the full inflated sense that Foucault tries to, you know, put forward as a kind of historical conspiracy theory. But there are definitely any sort of abstraction about sensation body comes from a phase of socio-economic technical systems which have assimilated those abstractions, distorted them, or forged them.
So can we go for the final assignments and the group presentations, Reza?
Yes, so who are the volunteers?
Sorry, we have to explain the final assignment, the group presentation for next week.
Yes, so essentially, you know that we have some reading materials for the first two sessions. You are going to produce a presentation, probably 3 people. You can also make a team making, but nevertheless, each presentation, regardless of whether it's being collectively made or individually, cannot be more than 10 minutes. Reading these materials, making a presentation, recording it, and then 2 days before the next session, which will be Friday next week, you can send it to our great moderator, and he will distribute it to us. We will look at it, we will all watch it, and then we will discuss the presentations. So who is going to do it? Okay, Max?
Should I say
Usually
anything?
always go with benevolency, saying that, well, you know, is voluntary, except that it's not really voluntary. Voluntary is for democratic people. Because if you are not going to be democratic people, then we have to shove it up your throat. Thank you, Kasia, you are going to do it. So, okay, we have democratic people.
Okay, so we have this tree for next week, and then I go past a spreadsheet so everyone can view their perfect week.
And remember, 2 days max, before the class. So, precisely because it takes time for the moderator to, put it in the Google folder, and then everyone can watch it, and then discussions, and then I will take it from there.
Just a question: is the specific text marked on the syllabus?
Yes, it's the Pyrrhonic one. Let me just go to my email. So it's Paul Russell, practical Pyrrhonist in the riddles of Hume's treatise. Nathan Brown, Rationalist Empiricism, the introduction. Ron Mall, Experience and Reason, page 1 to 28. You can use all of these resources, not all of them. I mean, you can selectively, go with one or another.
Okay, thank you.
No, so, sorry. Maybe you can speak a little bit more about the format. Like, how should it be structured? Like, is there a single question? Like,
No. Essentially, so you read the reading assignments, right? And you don't need to read all of them, just one of them. You think that is good for you. You take this and then you give a presentation. And I would actually suggest, if I'm not mistaken, you are new, to team up with someone else. And usually what people do is that they create a presentation, a PowerPoint, right? With fancy diagrams and, kind of going through some of the main salient points of this text, and fold it back into the discussions that we have had.
Together with the spreadsheet, I'm gonna send some instructions for the presentations too.
Yes. So, Maxim, you don't even need to make fancy diagrams. If you want to do this by yourself, the best way is just read one of these 3 texts that I mentioned, then highlight the salient parts and talk about them 10 minutes max, and somehow connect them back to the stuff that we have been doing, in the previous session, which is today's session.
So, but by next Wednesday, should I send you a video or
a recorded video? Yes, a recorded video. That would be magnificent. And then you send it to our great moderator. He's going to upload it to Google Drive, so everyone watches it, and then we are going to discuss it with other presentations, 2 other presentations next session.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, my dear girlfriend, I hope that wasn't utterly boring. See you next week and have a great weekend. Ciao.
See you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Amen.
Love you. Bye-bye.